Funny how the past always finds a seat at the table, especially when it's invited to be laughed at. The chandelier light fell cold and sharp across the marble floor as Sophia Bennett stepped into the ballroom, her heels soft against a silence that didn't last. It cracked the moment someone recognized her, then another, until the whispers curled into smirks and the smirks into quiet laughter dressed up as conversation, and at the center of it all stood Daniel Bennett, perfectly tailored, a glass of bourbon in hand, watching her the way someone watches a memory they've already rewritten. "Sophia," he said, not loud, but just enough for the people nearest him to turn. "I didn't think you'd come," and the woman beside him, polished, effortless, new, let out a small amused breath, as if Sophia were a story she'd already been warned about. The music kept playing, something soft and expensive, but it couldn't drown the way the room leaned ever so slightly away from her, measuring her dress, her shoes, the absence of anything that looked like success. Someone murmured single mom like. It explained everything, like it reduced her to a footnote, and Daniel's smile deepened, subtle but deliberate, as if this moment had been rehearsed. Sophia didn't answer right away, didn't give them the reaction they were waiting for. She only adjusted the strap of her clutch, worn but clean, and lifted her chin just enough to meet his eyes, steady, unreadable, a calm that didn't belong in a room designed to provoke. Across the hall, servers moved with silver trays, glasses chiming softly. And somewhere a camera flashed, capturing a version of this night that would never tell the whole story. Daniel took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You look the same," he said, which wasn't a compliment. "Not here, not now," and a ripple of quiet laughter followed. Polite, contained, cruel in its restraint. Sophia felt it, every glance, every assumption pressing in, but she didn't shrink, didn't flinch, because something in her had already decided, long before she walked through those doors, that this wasn't where her story would end, and as the laughter settled into a low hum, she stood there, still, composed, as if she were waiting for something no one else in the room could yet see coming. The laughter did not disappear, it only softened into something more refined, like a private joke shared between people who believed they were on the right side of the story, and Sophia could feel it trailing behind her as she moved deeper into the ballroom. Past polished marble columns and tables dressed in white linen, each step measured, unhurried, as if she had all the time in the world. She paused near a glass display where silent auction items were arranged under perfect lighting, watches, jewelry, rare collectibles, things that spoke the language of wealth without ever raising their voice, and for a brief moment, her reflection met her in the glass, calm, composed, almost distant, but her eyes carried something older than tonight. Something shaped long before this room decided who she was allowed to be. A memory flickered, not loud, not overwhelming, just a quiet echo of a smaller apartment with sunlight filtering through cheap blinds, a toddler's laughter filling a space that never felt large enough, and nights where she counted every dollar twice before deciding what could wait and what could not. No one here had seen that version of her, the one who rebuilt her life piece by piece without asking for permission, without announcing her struggle. And certainly without an audience. A server passed by offering champagne, and she declined with a polite shake of her head, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the tray as if grounding herself in something real. Something present. Across the room, Daniel's voice rose again, smooth, confident, drawing attention the way it always had, and a small circle formed around him, drawn in by familiarity and status, while Sophia remained just outside that orbit, not excluded. Not included, simply separate. Someone nearby whispered her name again, softer this time, less certain, as if trying to reconcile the woman standing here with the story they had been told, and Sophia did not correct them, did not offer context, because she understood something they did not. That truth did not need to compete with perception, it only needed time. Her gaze lifted slowly, scanning the room not for validation, but for something else entirely, something unseen but expected, like a moment waiting to arrive, and though no one noticed it yet, there was a quiet shift in the air, subtle, almost imperceptible, as if the evening had not yet revealed its real purpose, and Sophia, standing still in the center of it all, was the only one who seemed to sense it coming. Daniel's laughter rose again, slightly louder this time, drawing more attention as he gestured casually toward the auction floor, and although he did not call her name, the intention was clear. He wanted the room to remember she was there, to turn her presence into a performance, and slowly, like a tide shifting, the attention followed his lead. "You should try bidding tonight," he said with a polished smile, his voice smooth enough to pass as harmless. "It is for a good cause," and a few nearby guests exchanged glances, some amused, others curious, all waiting for how far this would go. The woman beside him tilted her head, studying Sophia with a faint, almost sympathetic smile that carried more judgment than kindness, as if she were observing someone who had once belonged in a different life and simply had not accepted it yet. Sophia did not move immediately, did not step forward or retreat. She only let the moment settle, her fingers resting lightly against the edge of the display table, grounding herself again in something solid, something unshaken. Another memory brushed past her, quieter than the last, a night when the electricity had nearly been cut off and she sat at a small kitchen table, calculator in hand, making decisions no one in this room would ever have to consider, and yet she had made them without bitterness, without asking for rescue. Back in the ballroom, the air felt heavier now, anticipation building not from kindness, but from expectation, the kind that hoped for discomfort, for proof that she did not belong here. A man standing nearby chuckled under his breath, not quite hiding it, and someone else murmured, "This should be interesting," as if the evening had just found its entertainment. Daniel took a slow sip of his drink, watching her over the rim of the glass, confident, certain, believing he understood exactly how this would unfold. But Sophia finally shifted, not toward him, not toward the center of attention, but slightly to the side, her gaze lifting once more, scanning beyond the crowd, beyond the familiar faces that had already decided her place, searching for something that had not yet revealed itself. And in that quiet, deliberate pause, there was no embarrassment, no hesitation, only a stillness that did not match the role they had assigned her, as if she were standing not in reaction to this moment, but in preparation for one that had yet to begin. The music softened into something almost reflective as the crowd slowly dispersed from the small circle Daniel had created, their attention drifting back to champagne glasses and polite conversations. But the residue of the moment lingered in the air like a faint echo that refused to disappear, and Sophia remained exactly where she was, untouched by the shifting energy around her, as if she existed just slightly outside the rhythm of the room. Beyond the tall glass windows, the city lights stretched endlessly, steady and indifferent, reminding her of nights when she stood in a much smaller space, holding a warm cup of coffee between her hands while her son slept in the next room. The quiet broken only by the hum of an old refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic that never seemed to rest. Those nights had not been glamorous, not impressive, but they had been hers, built from decisions no one applauded and sacrifices no one witnessed. A memory surfaced, clearer now, of a narrow office with worn wooden floors and a desk that did not match the chair behind it, where she had signed her name on documents she barely understood at the time, trusting instinct over certainty, choosing forward over safe. And no one had been there to congratulate her, no one had marked the moment as important, but it had been, even if the world had not noticed. Back in the ballroom, a server refreshed the candles on nearby tables, their flames flickering gently, casting soft shadows that danced across polished surfaces, and Sophia's gaze followed the movement for a brief second before returning to the room, scanning not for faces, but for something deeper, something connected to that quiet path she had walked alone. Daniel's voice still carried in the distance, confident and unchanged. But it no longer held the same weight, no longer defined the space around her. Instead, there was a subtle shift building beneath the surface of the evening, something unseen but approaching, like the first sign of a change in weather that Only a few could sense before it arrived, and Sophia, standing still with that same composed calm, seemed to feel it most clearly, as if every step she had taken since leaving this world behind had been leading her back here, not to prove anything, not to reclaim anything, but to stand in a moment that was finally ready to recognize her for what she had quietly become. The auction lights brightened slightly, signaling the next phase of the evening, and a soft chime echoed through the ballroom as guests began to gather closer to the stage, their movements unhurried but intentional, drawn by the quiet promise of prestige and recognition. Sophia did not follow immediately. She lingered where she stood, her gaze resting briefly on a framed document displayed among the items, its insignia subtle but familiar, though no one around her seemed to notice its significance. A voice from behind broke the stillness, calm and measured. "You are exactly where you are supposed to be," and she turned just enough to see him, William Harrington, standing with the kind of quiet presence that did not demand attention yet never went unnoticed, his suit understated, his expression composed, as if the entire evening had already unfolded in his mind long before it began. Sophia did not smile, but something in her eyes shifted, not surprise, not relief, just recognition, as though this moment had been expected, if not fully understood. "They still see what they expect to see," he continued softly, his gaze drifting across the room where Daniel now stood closer to the stage, surrounded again, confident, certain. "That has always been their limitation, not yours." Sophia followed his line of sight for a second, watching the familiar scene of admiration and shallow laughter, and for the first time that night, the distance between her and that world felt complete, not painful, not unresolved, simply finished. A server passed between them, momentarily breaking the quiet exchange, and when the space cleared again, William had not moved, his presence steady, as if he were not there to guide her, but to witness what was about to happen. "It will begin soon," he said, almost as an afterthought, before stepping slightly aside, giving her a clear view of the stage where the host now approached the microphone, adjusting his notes under the glow of the spotlight. The room gradually fell into a polite hush, conversations softening into silence. And Sophia finally stepped forward, not toward Daniel, not toward the crowd, but toward the center of something far more precise, her posture unchanged, her pace unhurried, carrying with her every quiet decision that had brought her here, and though no one had announced it yet, the evening had already shifted in a way they would not understand until it was too late to return to the version of her they thought they knew. The host adjusted the microphone, the faint feedback settling into silence as every conversation in the room dissolved into a collective pause, and the spotlight sharpened, drawing all attention to the stage where names would soon carry weight far beyond polite introductions. Sophia stood just at the edge of the crowd now, close enough to see the fine print on the program in the host's hand, yet still untouched by the expectations surrounding her, her posture steady, her breathing even, as if this moment belonged to her long before anyone else realized it. Daniel shifted a few steps closer to the front, his confidence intact, his presence loud without needing volume, and the woman beside him leaned in slightly, whispering something that made him smile, a quiet exchange that assumed the evening would unfold exactly as planned. The host began with practiced ease, thanking sponsors, acknowledging familiar names that drew nods and light applause, each introduction reinforcing the hierarchy everyone in the room understood without question. Sophia's gaze did not follow the applause, it remained forward, focused, as though she were listening for something specific, something that had not yet been spoken. A subtle movement caught the attention of a few nearby guests as William Harrington took his place along the side of the stage, not in the center, not demanding recognition, but positioned with quiet authority. His presence alone enough to shift the tone for those who noticed, though most were too absorbed in the rhythm of the program to understand what it meant. The host turned a page, pausing just long enough to let anticipation build, and in that brief silence, something changed, not in the room, but in the awareness of it. Like the air itself had drawn a deeper breath, Daniel glanced briefly across the crowd, his eyes passing over Sophia without stopping, still certain, still unaware, while she remained completely still, her expression unchanged, her composure unshaken. Then the host lifted his head, his voice carrying clearly across the ballroom, preparing to introduce the next name, and in that suspended second before the words were spoken, the entire evening balanced on a moment so quiet it almost felt invisible. Except to the one person who had been waiting for it all along. The host's voice finally broke through the silence, clear and measured, carrying across the ballroom with a weight that felt different from every name spoken before. And now, we would like to recognize the primary trustee of the Harrington Foundation. A brief pause followed. Subtle but deliberate, as if even he understood the shift that was about to occur, and in that suspended second, a few guests exchanged curious glances, trying to anticipate a name they believed they already knew. Daniel straightened slightly, his attention sharpening, the confidence still present but edged now with expectation, as if this announcement might somehow circle back to him or someone within his orbit. The woman beside him adjusted her posture, her smile poised, ready to greet another familiar figure of influence. Sophia did not move, her gaze steady on the stage, her expression unchanged, yet something in the stillness around her seemed to deepen, like a quiet center forming in the middle of the room. William Harrington remained at the side, his presence composed, his eyes not on the crowd, but on her. Then the name came, spoken without hesitation, without embellishment, Sophia Bennett, and for a moment, the room did not react, not because it did not hear, but because it did not understand. The sound of her name seemed to linger in the air, unclaimed by the expectations that had filled the space just seconds before. A few heads turned instinctively, searching, recalculating, trying to align the woman they had dismissed with the title they had just heard. Daniel's expression did not collapse, it shifted, subtly, almost imperceptibly. The certainty in his eyes interrupted by something unfamiliar, something that did not yet have a name. The quiet laughter from earlier did not return, it could not, replaced instead by a silence that felt heavier, more precise. Sophia did not rush forward, did not react to the attention that now began to gather around her. She simply stood for one breath longer, allowing the moment to settle, to fully arrive, before taking a single step toward the stage, her movement calm, deliberate, as if she were not stepping into something new, but into something that had always been hers, long before anyone in that room had learned how to say her name. The sound of her heels against the polished floor was soft, but in the silence that followed her name, it carried further than any voice in the room, each step measured, unhurried, as if she had walked this path 100 times before, even if no one else had seen it. The crowd did not part dramatically, it shifted subtly, instinctively, creating space not out of courtesy, but out of something closer to uncertainty, as though the rules they had relied on no longer applied. Daniel did not move. At first, his gaze fixed on her, trying to reconcile the woman he had dismissed with the title that had just been spoken, his expression controlled, but no longer effortless, the edges of his confidence beginning to blur. The woman beside him lowered her glass slightly, her posture adjusting, her earlier amusement replaced by a quiet calculation she could not fully hide. Sophia reached the steps leading to the stage and paused for the briefest moment, not out of hesitation, but as if acknowledging the weight of the space she was about to enter. Then continued upward, her movement steady, precise, untouched by the attention that now followed her. The host stepped aside with a respectful nod, offering her the center without question, and for a moment, the spotlight settled on her alone, not as an exposure, but as a recognition long overdue. William Harrington inclined his head slightly from the side, a gesture so subtle it could be missed, yet it carried a quiet confirmation that needed no explanation. Sophia did not look toward Daniel, did not search the crowd for reactions. She simply reached for the document placed on the podium, her fingers resting lightly on its surface, as if grounding the moment in something tangible. The room remained still, waiting, not for her to speak, but for something to make sense again, and when she finally lifted her gaze, it was not to address the past that had tried to define her, but to stand fully in the present that had already chosen her, without apology, without noise, and without needing anyone's permission. The room remained suspended in that quiet, fragile balance as Sophia stood at the center of the stage, her fingers resting lightly against the document before her, not gripping it, not claiming it with urgency, but holding it with the calm certainty of someone who had never needed permission to belong. The spotlight did not feel harsh anymore. It softened around her, as if even the light understood its role had changed, no longer exposing, but revealing. She did not rush to speak, and the absence of her voice carried more weight than any explanation ever could, drawing the attention of every person in the room into a silence that felt deliberate, almost respectful. Somewhere in the distance, a glass was set down too carefully. A chair shifted slightly, small sounds that betrayed the room's attempt to adjust to a reality it had not prepared for. Daniel stood still among them, no longer the center of anything, his presence reduced not by force, but by contrast, the effortless confidence he carried earlier now replaced by something quieter, something uncertain that did not yet know how to exist in this version of the moment. Sophia finally moved, not dramatically, not for effect, but with a simple, controlled motion as she signed her name across the document, the pen gliding smoothly, the gesture precise, final, and unmistakable. There was no announcement attached to it, no need for applause, yet the significance settled into the room like a truth that could not be undone. She placed the pen back exactly where it had been, aligning it carefully, as if closing a chapter that had already ended long before tonight. Her gaze lifted once more, not searching, not questioning, simply present, and for a brief second, it passed across the crowd without stopping, without anchoring to any face, including his. William inclined his head again, not in approval, but in acknowledgement, a quiet confirmation that everything had unfolded exactly as it should. Sophia turned then, stepping away from the podium with the same calm rhythm she had carried all evening, leaving behind a silence that no one dared to break, and as she descended the steps, the distance between who they believed she was and who she had always been finally collapsed without a single word, because she had not come back to be seen. She had come back already known, and in the end, she did not win anything from them. She simply stood in something that had always been hers.